engineering conversation and innovation. This is Schulich Connects.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anders Nygren, and as I think many of you know already, I was recently appointed to serve as the Dean of the Schulich School of Engineering for the upcoming 5 years. Thank you so much. I truly look forward to many opportunities to engage with all of you over the next 5 years, so thank you so much for that. It is my pleasure this morning to host you here for the final Schulich Connects event of this season, entitled Engineering Outside the Box, the Power of Cognitive Diversity. Before we get started with the program this morning, I'd like to just take a quick moment to acknowledge that we're gathered here this morning on the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7 here in southern Alberta. And this includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Good Stoney First Nations. And the city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. So the road to becoming an engineer is not always as linear as you might think. Some of the greatest innovators in engineering have backgrounds in business or in music or even professional athletics. And our thought-provoking panel this morning will feature a diverse group of professionals who have taken unconventional paths to and through engineering. We will hear how these diverse talents and abilities bring unique perspectives and drive creativity and problem solving in engineering. Before I pass it over to the speakers, I'd just like to speak to some logistics of this morning. I know that questions will arise as you hear the panel this morning. There will be a question and answer session at the end of this program, and at that time we will have somebody bring a microphone to you. So please just hold your questions until the end and know that you will have an opportunity to ask questions of the panel towards the end of the program. Okay, so I'd now like to introduce you to this morning's moderator, Dr. Emily Marasco. Emily is the Associate Dean of EDIA, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility at the Schulich School of Engineering, and also responsible for our first-year program. Emily holds the Schulich Chair in Engineering Education Innovation in the area of digital transformation, and she's an assistant professor teaching in the Department of Electrical and Software Engineering. She is the founder of the ADAPT Lab. ADAPT stands for Advancements in Digital Applications and Pedagogical Transformation. Emily received the 2016 Claudette McKay-Lassonde Graduate Award for Women in Engineering and was recognized as the 2018 Aztec Outstanding Leader of Tomorrow. She was also recognized as one of Calgary's 2019 Top 40 Under 40 recipients. So I'd like to pass it over to Emily now to introduce us to the rest of the panel. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Anders. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for the Schulich Connects event today. Cognitive diversity is a passion of mine in my role as Associate Dean, and it's looking at how people process and apply information differently depending on their own backgrounds and lived experiences. I recently gave a talk to our first-year engineering students where we talk about the importance of diverse perspectives in engineering design. I like to challenge them to think about their clients or their end users and how they might interact with your product or your process differently depending on their own their backgrounds, their lived experiences, and the various perspectives that have shaped how they view the world. And I like to use prosthetics as an example. I asked my students to consider how a pregnant woman, a young child, and a city transit driver might interact with the same prosthetic needs in a different way. How heavy does the arm have to be? What does it have to do? Who's thinking about lifting a child with the arm while someone else is thinking about the rotational capabilities? I asked them to think about their own lived experiences and how they experience the world differently from their peers. And students are really great at coming up with examples. So one student, for example, talked about noisy classroom environments and how they find that overwhelming for sensory processing, where another student said they actually struggle with silence and that they focus better when they have music or white noise in the background. My own journey in academia and research was very much inspired by the connections between music and engineering, largely influenced by one of today's panelists. As a woodwind player, I've trained in the importance of iteration and feedback. You practice on your own over and over again. You try playing it smoothly, you try playing it staccato, and you reinforce those patterns as you practice. Maybe you record yourself, you listen, you change things. Then you practice with your section, and your section leader gives you feedback. Then you put it all together with the ensemble, and the conductor gives you more feedback. Then there's a dress rehearsal, a performance, a competition. The audience gives you feedback. The judges are giving you feedback. And you're continually working to improve and reflect. In engineering education, I see how athletes and musicians understand the iterative engineering design process. As students, they think differently than the others around them. I see how students perceive design challenges differently based on their own life experiences, whether they're domestic, international students, maybe they're parents, maybe they're building a second career. All of those different life experiences, they bring to their design capabilities and their engineering practice. So today's panelists are three amazing examples of how varied life experience can build dynamic and rich impact within the field of engineering. And I've actually had the opportunity to work with all three of them in various capacities throughout my time at Schulich, and I'm very excited to have them share their journeys today. So first, we have Jessica Sudin. Jessica is a dynamic speaker and a motorsport engineer who teaches emotional and social intelligence through powerful motorsport analogies. She delivers impactful presentations and facilitates relational skills workshops that transform teams through civil communication, conflict resolution, and effective decision-making processes. Driven by passion, Jessica earned a master's degree in motorsport race engineering. As a trackside engineer and driver coach, she's built motors in her living room, provided mechanical support for racing teams, and coached others on mindset optimization. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
Next, I'll introduce Dr. Daryl Caswell. Daryl is a professor emeritus of mechanical engineering at the Schulich School of Engineering. He received degrees in music from the University of Toronto and Northwestern University in Chicago. Daryl also completed a PhD from the University of Calgary. He has played with the Canadian Opera Company and the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra. Daryl was also principal horn with the Red Deer Symphony Orchestra for over 35 years. He has designed and manufactured tools for the music industry and is known for his preventative maintenance approach to musical instrument repair and care. A dedicated engineering educator, Daryl was recognized by the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education for his innovative approach to engineering design education. Welcome, Daryl.
Thank you.
Finally, we have DeAndre Wilson Ihe Jurika. DeAndre is a licensed professional engineer and project management professional. She spent nearly a decade working in the oil and gas industry before pivoting into education and edtech, economic development, and nonprofit leadership. DeAndre recently successfully defended her PhD and is an IBET Fellow conducting research on understanding the transition from education to work for underrepresented groups in STEM. In addition to her PhD research, DeAndre works as the Executive Director of Work Integrated Learning at Calgary Economic Development. She is also the founder and president of BrainSTEM Alliance, a nonprofit that collaborates with industry and community partners to engage STEM professionals. She is the co-chair of the EDI group for the Canadian Engineering Education Association and is also an executive board member for Learning City, sits on the Foresight Committee for Engineers Canada, and is a mentor with Black Engineers Canada. Welcome, DeAndre.
Thank you.
All right, so to get our panel warmed up, I'm going to start with some introductory questions. We'll go through a little bit of each of their journeys, and then we will have the opportunity for our audience to ask questions as well. So to start with, can each of you share a little bit about your personal, non-conventional journey into the engineering field? And I will let Daryl go first, and then we'll go DeAndre, and then Jessica.
Well, I think the best way I can describe my adventure is to give you a very specific example as quickly as I can. I showed up to engineering school. I was a fully developed professional musician playing French horn in the Canadian Opera and the Calgary Philharmonic. And in my third year of engineering, I was in a metallurgy course, and I was looking for a project to see, could I do engineering, and the arts. And my oboe friends in the Philharmonic told me that the oboe community is very unhappy with the tools that they have to use to make their tiny little reed, a particular knife, scraping knife, to make the tiny little reed that makes the sound of the instrument. And they had been talking to metallurgists and engineers, and they got the same response all the time as, well, there's nothing wrong with the science here. It's really just your imagination, wishful thinking that there could be better tools. And so I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good, interesting project. So I got access to the metallurgy lab. I discussed the problem with my professors and heard from them also, well, there's not going to be anything wrong with the metallurgy. It's going to just be wishful thinking on the part of the artists. And so I did go, and I got to use the lab. They let me do it, even though they figured nothing would happen. And I did all the tests in the lab, all the hardness tests, all the alloy tests, all the tensile tests, everything. Came up with nothing. So, and this is the crux of my whole world, living in this world, is okay. So I had this choice. I could take my professor's word at it and say, okay, I guess there's no problem here. There's nothing wrong with the metallurgy. It's just wishful thinking. But I'm a professional musician. I know that every person who is successful in the arts has deep wells of tacit knowledge about the craft, everything to do with the craft. Tacit knowledge is knowledge that is very personal. It doesn't lend itself to quantification or standardization or formulation, but it is very hard-won knowledge that comes from years and years of very intense study, practice, research, performance, and we were, when we discount it in the sciences, we're not doing ourselves any favor. So I decided, okay, my job here is to recognize that knowledge, that tacit knowledge, put it on the table, give it the recognition it deserves, and my job was going to be to take whatever the oboe players tell me. I just asked them to explain what they thought about the issues of the knives they were using, and then my job was to say, okay, I'm going to take what they've told me and translate that into what I have learned about metallurgy. So this little part here, that may have something to do with nucleation. This concern over here, that could be diffusion. This could be alloy content. This could be time, temperature transformation issues. And so over time, talking with them and studying more about metallurgy, I sort of got this picture in my mind of what the microstructure might look like that could solve their problems. And then I started just testing and going completely outside what the standard times, temperatures there. I just pushed the boundaries away and just started looking. And I'll never forget the day I'm looking in the microscope in the lab, and there is that microstructure right in front of me. And with a little bit of refining of that, we ended up with a metallurgical process for creating extremely fine, abrasion-resistant scraping edges that are not just abrasion-resistant, but they are able to achieve 3 different kinds of performance out of the same hardness of steel. And so that knife has been the industry standard for the last 40 years, and the metallurgy won numerous awards, one of them which was second prize in the International Metallographic Competition. So that really sort of cemented it for me that if a guy with 2 kids crawling through his engineering degree, barely making it through metallurgy, can win an international prize, all he's done is combine the art or the artist's knowledge with the engineer's knowledge, there's got to be something in there. And so I kept going down that road.
And I have to tell you, as an oboe player, yes, good. As an oboe player myself, I do use that knife, and I actually encountered Daryl in the wild before I was an engineering student at an oboe conference to hear about the knife. And then imagine my shock when he was one of my engineering professors. All right, DeAndre, please share a little bit about your journey with us.
Thank you. I think my journey is quite different from Daryl's. I think I started a little bit more in that traditional engineering path before branching into some of where I am now. But I do really love what you spoke about in terms of tacit knowledge and how that's not necessarily something that's easy to quantify or describe, but it's based on that experience, which is a lot of the work that I do now, both with Calgary Economic Development and the work that I do with Learning City, and just really understanding that those experiences and experiential learning can really shape how we grow, how we design things, how we move through our careers. But I guess about me, well, you heard my bio, but to take one step back, I was born and raised in the Bahamas, and so that's where I grew up. That's where I spent most of my life before coming to Canada. And I was just talking with some of the other panelists and folks. When was the first time you saw snow? When I was 17, when I moved to McGill to do my undergraduate degree. But for me, I didn't really know much about engineering before coming to Canada. I knew as a high school student that I liked math, I liked chemistry, and so I Googled, was it Google or whatever it was then? I looked up online, what I could do with those subjects, and chemical engineering came up. But there wasn't an option to do that in the Bahamas, which is how I ended up in Canada. A lot of people ask, you're from the Bahamas, why are you here in the cold? But that's how I ended up here, and obviously I stayed here and have had an amazing career since then. I worked in the oil sands, as Emily mentioned, but during my undergrad I was very involved in an organization called the National Society of Black Engineers. And so during that time, I was involved in a lot of outreach, a lot of networking. And so when I moved to Fort McMurray to work in the oil sands, I wanted to continue some of that work. And that's actually what led me to found Brainstem Alliance, which Emily mentioned before. And so starting that nonprofit really took me down this path of STEM education, engineering education, and eventually led to me pivoting out of the traditional engineering career path and into the work that I'm doing now in engineering education, in economic development, and in experiential learning. And so, as mentioned, I currently work with Calgary Economic Development. I'm the executive director of work integrated learning there. I recently led a pilot initiative called Talent Ed YYC, which just wrapped up on March 31st of this year. And won an award for an innovative approach to economic development just recently at the Economic Development of Alberta conference. And so I think for me, coming through engineering, but then pivoting into where I am now and getting to work with folks from a number of different backgrounds, I get to both bring some of what I've learned from traditional engineering and how to look at systems, how to connect things, while also being able to learn from folks with different backgrounds that have that different tacit knowledge and look at different ways that we can design and innovate systems, especially in the workplace and in the education spaces. And so that's the work that I do now. And as Emily mentioned, I just recently successfully defended my PhD in this area. So thank you. So I'm really excited to continue applying some of that to the work that I do.
Thank you, DeAndre. And actually, DeAndre has been instrumental in mentoring our own UCalgary chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. All right, and we will move now to Jessica. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are.
My background, it's been quite the ride, literally. I went to school here at U of C, and between my third, fourth year of engineering, I went to a Formula SAE fundraiser, and Formula SAE is one of the fourth-year design projects. I was not on the race car team Formula SAE stuff here when I was going to school, but I went to their fundraiser, and I won motorcycle lessons. I didn't grow up with bikes. I wasn't a kid riding dirt bikes or anything like this. And little did I know, winning these motorcycle lessons would turn into a passion, an obsession, and a career. And it was pretty cool. So I started riding on the street, started going to the track to learn my motorcycle a little bit. In the meantime, working as a design engineer, Sanmina, Nortel, General Dynamics, all of these things, and also being a contract engineer after being laid off really early in my career and deciding that I was going to make my own company and be a contract engineer. Thank you. One of my motivations for being a contract engineer was so that I could ride my motorcycle more. So how would I make a little extra money being a contract engineer, and then I can take 4, 5, 6 months off, go down to the States, ride a bunch of tracks down there, and carry on. Well, it was, and by the way, Dr. Caswell was also one of my profs about 30 years ago. And he actually comes full circle in this story as well. So as I decided to race motorcycles, someone at the racetrack said, you know, you're slower than molasses in January, but you're very comfortable in traffic. Have you thought about racing? Well, I went home, started ripping off my headlights out of my motorcycle, the signals, anything that weighed stuff that I didn't need, and started racing. No background in this. And after a couple of years, I decided I want to marry this hobby of mine with my career. So I brought, and Dr. Caswell attended, Tony Fole, who's super crazy famous. I had no idea, and just sent him an email and said, hi, I'm Jessica. I'm an engineer. I race motorcycles. You do seminars all over the world. Didn't see Canada on your list. How can I host you? And I hosted, marketed, did all this stuff in about 2005 to bring Tony, and he helped me look for these master's or PhD programs in Europe. And it was fabulous. So at this point, I thought, well, if I'm going to be a race engineer, I didn't know I was going to do 4 wheels, not 2. But if I'm going to be a race engineer, I might as well know what I'm talking about, but also have some of that street cred. So I imported a motorcycle from New Zealand. I don't understand. In your 30s, you can do anything. It's amazing. So I imported a motorcycle from New Zealand, promptly brought it into my living room, opened up the Japanese manual that I had. Internet was not like it was before. I got an English manual snail mailed to me a little short while later, and started teaching myself how to build motors. So a couple of years after that, I had another few years of racing with this little 2-stroke motorcycle that I had to change the piston every 500 clicks. I had to change the crank every 1,500 clicks. And decided to donate, sell, or burn, there were some good fires, everything I owned except for a house, and book off to northern Spain, to Basque Country, and earn that master's in motorsport race engineering. From there, I was a freelance race car engineer, working at the best tracks all over Europe with open-wheel formula cars. So these are feeder classes to get to F1. Soccer and hockey parents got nothing on race car driver parents, yeah? Because they're dropping about 40 grand a week, euros, to have their kids race. You pay until you get to F1. And it was a very interesting career, to say the least. Like, got to learn a lot of languages, learned a lot about different cultures, learned a lot about communications. Came back to Canada. I married the truck driver from the race car team that I did my master's at, so I brought a jerk wife thing to do, bring a truck driver to Canada. Sorry, honey. But and then I came back, went back to corporate, worked my way up to a global engineering director and a VP of engineering, and then I decided all of this experience is so cool, and there are so many soft skill lessons, plus technical, plus culture, plus teamwork in a different way, especially racing, because super crazy pressure. So now I do keynote talks and I facilitate workshops on relational skills with executive teams. And I bring very special keynote talks to conferences, AGMs, what have you. And it's been, like I said, a heck of a ride. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. It's very inspiring to hear about the different journeys that you've taken within your engineering paths. For my next question, I know it's not always an easy road to merge engineering with other disciplines or other passions. What are some of the barriers that you've faced either for yourself or you've seen others face, and what could we do in academia or industry to help remove some of those barriers for the next generation? I'll let anybody start.
Well, Emily, you may recall when you were in first year and I kind of picked you up off the ground and said, Emily, you have to advocate for yourself. And I think it took her a few years, but I know at one point I realized that she had made it because she, I think, made her own decisions about who was going to supervise her. And so at that point, I think, okay, she has done it. She's advocated for herself, and I can't tell you how important that is because if you're taking an unusual path, you've got to find the time and space to create your own way through the maze. And certainly a large institution is not meant for you. And so you're going to have to find your own way, and you're going to really need people who are going to have your back and help you through it. And I can't tell you how many professors I had who could have easily discounted me and yet, supported me and stood behind me when I inevitably crashed in trying to do the normal things. And as I've often said, if you ask me to do something the same as everyone else does, mediocrity is the absolute best I'll ever do. But if you let me do things my own way, then surprising things will happen. But you've got to have those people in the institution. The institution doesn't necessarily have to adapt to you. It would be nice if they could find ways to allow you to create space, but you pretty much have to take the space and take the time. I mean, I didn't do 6 courses per term. I made sure that I went to school all year round and did enough courses to stay in, to fulfill the obligations, but not so many that I had to give up playing or give up the musical side of my life. So it's that advocacy that has to come from you and from those who can support you that's so important.
It's come full circle because now it's my job to pick first years up off the ground. Tiandre, anything you want to add to that?
Definitely. I mean, I think, to what Daryl said, that, advocating for yourself and taking up space is important, but I do also think that there are obligations to the institution and the system to look at how we can make a more inclusive space within engineering. I mean, I think this panel is an example. A lot of times there are certain ideas of what an engineer could or should look like, both physically as well as, the types of skills that someone coming into engineering should have. This very well, Emily, but one of the main barriers to folks entering into an engineering degree is typically the physics. But there are other aspects. I was privileged, as I mentioned before, that I was good at math and science, and so that allowed me to come to Canada to pursue a degree in engineering, but not everyone has those specific grades. And to what Daryl said before about some of that tacit knowledge or some of those other transferable skills, if folks are coming from different paths, how are we recognizing that they still have that cognitive ability to come through an engineering degree, even if they might not have specifically on paper, a certain grade in math or a certain grade in physics. And so I do think we need to expand how we're looking at sort of those prerequisites or what that criteria is for someone to come into engineering. And then obviously, as you mentioned, when they are here in an engineering degree and they're studying engineering, how are those courses structured? How is the degree structured to ensure that folks can navigate through this system, but also bring those aspects of themselves into engineering, because we recognize, and I think we realize, especially the folks here on this panel, that those personal interests and those lived experiences can also help to create a more robust engineering education, not just for that individual, but for the peers that they work with. So I think those are some of the things that we need to think about as an institution and how we can create that more inclusive space within engineering.
Sweet. You're such a great speaker. Wow. That's an awesome answer. So for me, it was perseverance. And so I also, like Dr. Caswell, in my last year, or my last couple of years, I figured out that 6 courses wasn't necessarily the best idea. I wish I figured that out at the beginning. However, so on my transcripts, on the very first page of my transcripts, placed on academic probation after my first year, and that never goes away, and that's okay. So one of the things that academia supported me on was I had some really great profs that knew that this was happening and said, you know, mechanical might not be your best subject. I excelled in programming, but I really didn't care for it. And they really, Dr. Janet Ronsky was one of my faves that really supported me. But what academia can do for when you're trying to go through your career and really push it is support you and have people there to say, it's okay to fail a little bit. Just keep going. You know, and that really helped me in the race car team, so you can imagine. So we talked about perception. I'm all 5'1.5" if I do yoga. And, you know, tiny little thing telling mechanics what to do and all of this. And it's challenging, right? It's really, really challenging. So that was one of the biggest things for me in university is that I had that support to keep going. Also, I think it's awesome to leverage what academia offers as far as extracurricular clubs. So I was part of the Mechanical Engineering Society. I was VP of events, shock of shock. I was organizing parties, organizing events, ski trips, all of this kind of stuff, and just making sure that everyone had a good time while they were going to school, because that's real important, your mental health, for your ability to learn.
Anything that you would add about industry supports as people are getting out there and wanting to have a more non-traditional career, or how they can be their authentic selves when they go out into practice?
Well, some of my colleagues that I struggled through engineering school with have gone out and created their own business because they couldn't find the space or the time within larger companies. And they have really, one of them in particular, created an engineering paradise by allowing that kind of cognitive diversity to rule how they operate. And there was a mechanical design company that, like I said, was really a paradise for engineers. But they struggled to survive and didn't survive once they got so big that they had to sort of take on more of the traditional organizational attributes. And the diversity kind of just faded into the background, and the company that went down. So to keep that stuff going, you really have to make almost like an oasis for those, I call us misfits. We got to have a place where we can expand and we can bring our passions to the workplace. It's no good saying, yeah, you do that after you've done your 10-hour-a-day work for us. It needs to be right inside the organization, and you know, other companies have done it. I saw at a Ford assembly plant, they allowed the assembly workers to have an entire wall upon which they could paint in their spare time or in their off hours. So it's really that mode of creating and maintaining some kind of time and space that allows people with passion to work. Because if you don't, those people with passion will just leave because they have passion. And if they're not getting what they want out of your business, they're going to go find one, or they're going to start their own. So it's a real challenge, because you have to carve that space out, or allow them to carve it out. We'll just do it ourselves. You just have to let us do it.
I've got a great example of that. When I was working at one place, they really, really encouraged our hobbies. And I remember one of the engineers had his hand glider suspended from the ceiling in the office. And this just really showed how that particular corporate company was really encouraging all of us to show what we were doing. You know, there was a couple of us at the time that were racing motorcycles, so you'd see, you know, Monday morning, especially for me if I was on my own on a Sunday night coming back from a race and I couldn't unload my bike and stuff, then I'd be driving to work, because I didn't want my bike to get stolen, with my trailer on it, with the motorcycle, and then Monday evening I'd be able to unload it. But it was so great because they created this space to celebrate everyone's quirky hobby. And it was awesome. Like there were times where I had a bunch of the engineering gals and guys come out to watch me race back at Race City, and it was this bonding with your coworkers on a brand new level, and I think that can also really support industry. So I encourage that in the work that I do as well, working with teams. How are we able to connect as human beings so that this feeds into a much more productive, happy, cohesive, challenging, in a good way, workplace?
All right, so now this is an opportunity for our audience to ask questions. Daryl and I had a conversation this week about how diversity and innovation, while they go hand in hand, you can't just have them exist on their own. They need to be stacked up from the bottom. Oh, I'm going to build a bad tower. So we do have these little cubes for anybody who would like to ask a question to remind you about innovation and diversity. So we have prizes. Anybody would like to ask a question? Okay, Joe. And does this mean I have to run around with the blocks? Probably.
That's okay. I'll get it from you later, Emily. Thank you.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, one for Trisha.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. It's wonderful to see you up there, and more inspiring than I ever thought to hear your stories of where you've come from. And I think it's wonderful to share those stories publicly, and so important. One of the observations I've made is that you're all extremely confident, and you persevered through challenge, and not every individual that we have here in the university setting has that same kind of internal strength for various reasons and life experiences. Reflecting on the engineering education piece, looking back where you are now, what could we do as an institution, as a program, to have helped inspire you and support you very early on so that maybe it wouldn't have been quite so challenging?
I can kick it off. For me, it's the encouraging of getting involved in whether that be MES, ESS, all of that kind of stuff, because as you're involved in the different clubs and the different outside of the academic world, but it's still very much part of the university and of the community that's here, you get more comfortable with public speaking. You get more comfortable with interacting with people. And I think public speaking, even if it's on a various levels, I think that gives a confidence that we don't even know. And it may feel like this giant thing like, oh my God, I don't want to talk in front of hundreds of people. You don't have to. Any little step of putting yourself out there is automatically building that resilience, building the resilient neuropaths in your brain, and I think that's super important.
Yeah, I'd love to reiterate that. I do think making sure that students have the space and the support to be involved in student clubs is so important and pivotal to their perseverance through their engineering degree and into their careers. I mentioned it already, but the National Society of Black Engineers was really pivotal for me. I don't know if I would have finished my degree without being able to participate in that club. I think you can see I'm the only Black identifying woman, I think, one of only 2 or 3 Black people in this room, maybe. I still notice that everywhere I go. It's very common for me to be the only Black woman in the room, and so having that space within my undergrad, especially, like I said, I grew up in the Bahamas, so there I was not a minority, but coming to Canada, I recognized that I was, and both stepping into that space and into engineering, as you mentioned, which is a challenging degree, being able to have that space, that sort of counter space within my degree in the National Society of Black Engineers was really important. And so being able to have the support to participate in that really helped me to persevere. And, I've said this to a few folks. I met my husband through the National Society of Black Engineers. I met lifelong friends that I still, connect with to this day and who have helped me through my career. So I think, that would be one of the big takeaways. And, echoing what Jess has said as well is through that club and through other clubs that I participated in, got the chance to build my confidence, to practice my public speaking, to practice my networking, to be exposed to folks from different institutions, from different disciplines. And so I think continuing to make sure that students have that space to participate in those is so important.
And I would say to get very specific, it's in academia, it's all about grades. And people like me and Jessica are not going to be the 4.0 students. In fact, Jessica and I are in a race to the bottom. She was on probation, I was on probation. When I was a professor...
I won.
No, not yet. When I was a professor, the students had, some kind of competition where for reading week, and one of the jobs was to find the professor who had the lowest GPA in their education. Okay, Jessica, I think I've got that one. But the point is, though, you're going to see people like us in the probation office, and rather than telling us that we, as was told to me at least twice during my 4 years, we don't really think you have what it takes to be an engineer, you should maybe go and do something else. Rather than doing that, how about accepting that maybe I'm here because I'm putting my energy into many, many different areas and slowly bringing this chuck wagon to under control rather than just riding a single racehorse. And maybe what I just need is a little help from you as professors to help me find my way through. If I have to take a course again, it's not the end of the world. Many engineers have to do that. And the one thing I would have liked to get help with right at the beginning is I made the mistake of doing all the math all at once as fast as I could do it. And I wish that there had been someone there to say, don't. Take your time, take other courses, because you need to let the math percolate. And I think I suffered my whole career from that mistake that I made originally. And if I'd had someone to help me guide me through that very beginning, that would have been a great thing. So, those grades are something that I think we have to learn to help people understand that failure is a good thing. You can take a course twice, you're going to know it much better than you did the first time. And not to say, okay, you're in here, you don't think you have what it takes. It's more like, let's find out where your passions lie and if we can help you get where you need to go.
Thank you, everyone. I loved all the comments, and really the world needs diversity of thought. The question I have, it's great to see what's happening at the university, and I loved all of your stories. How do we change this in the corporate world? Because it's still very much a black and white thinking world.
Yeah, you hire me.
There you go.
Not joke, but I'm glad everyone's laughing. But where I think that's going to happen in the corporate world is the top down, and you have to show the value for the leadership teams. And unfortunately, sometimes that has to be shown in different metrics, like how do you feel about hemorrhaging money for turnover? How do you feel about the uncomfortableness and the subtle passive-aggressive, sometimes not so passive-aggressive behavior that's going on within your leadership team demonstrated and then trickling down? So I feel the way that we work on that in corporate land is you got to find out where are the pain points, let's address them, how is this going to be better, but it really has to come from the top down. So it's funny because I don't often go to HR to go get work. I'll go to a C-suite. Because if the C-suite isn't bought into it, then it's not going to happen. So how do we get this mindset change is sitting down with the leaders and exposing the pain points, and whether they're problem aware or problem not aware, the conversation itself is going to expose what's needing to be done. So the comment is, I'm not sure that people are seeing the value of diversity because of this rollback. So what I often, when I do my talks or when I'm talking with a team, and even when I was a VP of engineer, I said, all women bad, all men bad. You know, and it's not about hiring for X amount of people or filling a quota, because that's really the pushback, let's just call it out, that you get with diversity and equity. But it's about how our brains are wired. And how I show the value is you will never solve a problem with the same type of brains in the room, as well as you will solve a problem with people approaching it different. And that means that I personally want for my team the most diverse team that I can get. That's how I show the value, personally.
And you know what? I think that is a great message to end with, the idea that we need different thinkers in the room so that we are not all tackling a problem the same way. Well, I really want to thank Jessica, DeAndre, and Daryl for sharing their perspectives and journeys with us today. I know there are lots of more questions in the room. If you want to come visit with them for a few minutes, they'll be sticking around. I really appreciate the opportunity to moderate this discussion and for all of you attending today. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dean Nygren.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you to the whole panel. So Emily, Daryl, DeAndre, and Jessica for a really engaging panel discussion this morning. What a wonderful way to end our Schulich Connects session for this academic year. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank all of you for taking the time this morning to spend your breakfast and this panel discussion with us. I know you're all busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time to engage with us. We are going to take a bit of a break from Schulich Connects over the spring and summer months. So please keep an eye on your inboxes as we get towards the end of the summer for invitations for opportunities to yet again engage with us once we get to the fall. Judging by the blinding light up there behind you, it's a very nice spring day this morning, so I hope you have a good rest of your day and enjoy the nice weather outside. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this Schulich Connects. We'll see you next time.